Moving on to general items number 9. Extend and revise the existing lease of the Madden House for the Yuba City Chamber of Commerce. This will be presented by Mr. Darren Gale. He's our Economic Growth and Public Affairs Director. Mr. Gale.
Good evening, Mayor Buckland and council members. This evening, it's my pleasure to come before you to discuss the lease that the City of Yuba City has with the Yuba City Chamber of Commerce. First, a little bit about the home. The Madden House was gifted to the city and was restored as part of the Winco development project in 1995. As part of this gift, the property is actually limited in its uses for either community or public purposes, and the house has been used for such since that time. In January of 2011, the City Council signed a lease with our Chamber of Commerce. The Yuba City Chamber of Commerce was located for many years in Marysville. About 80%, or all, I won't even use a number. The majority of the members of the Yuba City Chamber of Commerce are actually located on this side of the river. And we encourage the chamber to possibly move into the Madden House. That lease began on April 1st of 2011, and it expires on the end of this month of 2016. In 2013, it's been a while, we actually came before council and had a little discussion about what to do with the lease and extending it with the chamber or changing it. At that time, the council gave us some direction to draft a lease-to-own a lease agreement. Unfortunately, for a variety of reasons, it's taken us a while to get back. And now we're back before you to discuss this lease. What is being proposed in a new lease-to-own contract is as follows. First, the lease would expire March 31st of 2031, which would be a full 20-year lease from the beginning. The chamber could terminate the lease at any time and would not retain any equity in the building. Rent would change from currently it is $1,250 is the current rent. A portion of that goes to a capital fund, and a portion of that goes to rent. Rent would go to $1 on the rent side of things, or the lease payments, and then $500 would continue to go to the capital fund on a monthly basis. Currently, there is a capital fund that is in the current lease. And it is capped at $20,000, and right now there is approximately $16,000 in that fund. That fund is to be used for major. It's not meant for the day-to-day maintenance of the building, but for any type of major improvements to the facility. Our current lease, the city maintains the building. Any type of the roof leaking, HVAC, alarm systems. There's a split, but the city has taken on those costs. For the last 5 years, on average, the cost for maintaining the home has been around $9,000 annually. With the proposed lease, as I mentioned, that capital fund would be increased to $30,000. The property, once again, could only be used for chamber business activities unless written authorization is given by the city manager. The chamber now would be responsible for maintaining of the building. And at the end of the 20-year lease, the chamber would be able to purchase the building for $1. And the property would still remain deed restricted to ensure a public, civic, or community purpose is currently recorded against the property. Additionally, at the end of the lease, any remaining funds of the capital fund would remain with the city for the sole purpose of improvements to the Madden House if needed. If the council would to move forward with this lease, the city would be required to make sure that the property is in good order. I've actually asked Mr. Toscano to do an inspection on the home, since he's the original contractor who refurbished it. And he has some concerns about the lease, and I know that he'll want to speak about that. And I can answer any questions that the council might have.
Any questions of Mr. Gale?
Through the mayor.
Go ahead.
Couple questions, Darren. So currently, we're collecting $1,250 a month rent, and we're
Correct.
paying approximately $9,000 a year, and that's really the difference. If we go to the $500 a month, we're saving about, or we're not getting $9,000, so we're just basically just shifting that. But the other question I have is, let's say that as we shift all of this responsibility to the chamber, and let's say 5 years from now that they need to put in a new HVAC system or a new roof, and it costs $10,000. And at that time, let's say we've reached the cap of $30,000, and so now it drops down to $20,000. Would we then start collecting $500 a month again until we got back up to that cap, or how would that work going forward, subtracting for major expenses on the house?
So the simple answer is yes. We begin recollecting $500 until the capital fund reached the $30,000 cap.
Thank you.
Any additional questions of Mr. Gill? Thank you very much, Darren, and I'm sure Mr. Toscano would like to speak. Any other member from the public that'd like to speak to this, you can also go and line up next to Mr. Gale.
It's John Toscano, 741 East Hillcrest, Yuba City, California. Yes, I was the original contractor and remodeled the house and was reimbursed by the city through the developer. And it's remained in a great condition thanks to the city of Yuba City. My concern is that I'm going to look at the costs and the overall, let's say, aged depreciation of the house and where it would be in terms of the major costs that you talked about in the next 10 days. My opposition is that the city taxpayers, in lieu of getting this house, gave up some improvements to that shopping center. In other words, the city would have required more of other amenities that the taxpayers would be driving by instead of
Palm trees.
or whatever, fountains, landscaping, whatever. That didn't happen. My feeling is that there's very few of these houses left in the city and in Yuba City, and all we've proven at this point is the city is a good steward at taking care of this house. We haven't proven that the Chamber of Commerce is that steward. And to give them a $500 to $1 million house or piece of property for $1 when they haven't proven they can take care of it seems a little discreditable at this point. I believe that there's no safeguards that when they get the house for the dollar, that it remains in good condition, because the city's been paying for all of this for all of these years, including the next 20. So it seems to me that I have no opposition to the chamber being there, to paying the rents, to doing whatever, but they didn't do a very good job in Marysville when they were over there and were in charge of taking care of that facility. So I think it remains to be seen, and I'm willing to help with this process, but I'm really opposed to putting that purchase in there for $1. That's my comment.
The Mayor, I have a question for you. What type of safeguards would you put in to ensure that the house was maintained at the level that it has been?
Well, I think the taxpayers have a right to keep that home. But I'd also have a committee, which I would be part of. I've been volunteering for a long time on this and other projects in the city. But somebody that isn't a city employee with the responsibility of watch guarding what's going on. That's committee, inspections. I don't know really what you want to call it.
Well, if you were renting a property, obviously you have right to go in and do inspections to make sure that
That's right.
the rental property is being maintained at a certain level and so on. And so perhaps that might be a condition of this also.
Well, we're talking about city taxpayers.
I understand completely, and I want to see it maintained well also.
Well, and I want to see it stay on the roster. And truthfully, the rec department was in there for a while, and they outgrew it. And we've had other agencies in there, and because it's a house primarily, it isn't a great fit for everybody. But to just lose it all of a sudden as an asset, because the supposed thing is that they're supposed to be bringing new business into the city. Well, that's well and fine, but they haven't proven whether or not they can take care of that facility because the city's doing it. That's my biggest beef.
I fully understand your concern, and I share that concern. So perhaps through this whole process, we need to set up some safeguards so that the taxpayers who are essentially going to be handing this over, and I think that the chamber does qualify for one of these public uses of that property. And I know that when we had Parks and Rec in there, it was actually costing us more than that $9,000 a year to maintain that facility. And we were looking at ways at how do we reduce those costs to the taxpayers. And this was one of the options of doing that. But I certainly agree with you that we have to have safeguards to make sure that that asset remains a good asset for the community, not just now, but well into the future.
Maybe 21 years from now.
Exactly.
Mr. Toscano, thank you very much. And I think we have another speaker from the public.
If I'm understanding this right, you're going to let them rent it for 15 years at $500 a month. And then they buy it for $1. And if they decide to knock it down and put more of Winco or Starbucks or whatever, they can do it, huh?
No,
How are you going to stop it?
no.
Because I remember the Onstadt house and Yuba City was supposedly trying to protect it.
Okay. We're not going to get into the Onstadt house and some of the other components that have happened outside of the city's jurisdiction or what happened at midnight on any given night. This is a community asset. It is a historical house. And I will assure you, this council has absolutely no desire to see this house destroyed, removed, or anything else. We've taken great care to make sure that this house remains in the community and certainly is cared for over a duration of time. To do otherwise would be a travesty, and it would take away from what that home represents on that corner, and certainly it being used for the public good at this point. So I'm going to have Mr. Gale answer some of the questions that you had regarding the assurances through the sale of this house in the future.
I hope he does, because just looking at that, $1 and 15 years later, it could be destroyed. And I don't want that. I want a guarantee.
Thank you very much. Mr. Gale, if you could answer what the safeguards that would be put in place in a contract regarding the future of this home, precluding, and I will tell you that there are things that come to my mind as to insurance. At what level would insurance rebuild this home should there be a fire? And I'm sure that the fire chief can speak to some of the measures that have been taken there. I know that during a portion of the reconstruction, there was a fire there. And the house was brought back to an even better condition, I think, as a result of that fire. So, Mr. Gale.
So I'm trying to look for the exact language within the agreement. But it's in the event the chamber exercises a purchase option, restrictions shall be included on the deed transferring the property to the chamber, providing that the conveyance is made on the condition that the property is to be ever held and used for public, civic, or community purpose. And if the property is not used for such purposes, it shall revert to the city. If language wanted to be included in there specifically related to that the home could never be torn down, I'm sure that the chamber would have no issue with that. Actually, Jackie Lee is here representing the chamber. I believe that's their CEO is having an anniversary, and so she's out of town. If you'd like that language added, we can always include that.
Through the mayor.
Go ahead.
I don't know that, and I think it does talk about maintenance here. The chamber shall maintain the property in good and sanitary condition. Chamber will be responsible for all interior routine maintenance, walls, ceilings, windows, coverings, etc. Chamber will be responsible for all kitchen appliances. So we've got some things in there, but perhaps if we could add to that there would be an annual inspection to ensure the condition that the home is being maintained at the level that they received it.
But for the next 15 years, the home will still be owned by the city. It'll still be covered by our insurance, and we will be inspecting it on a regular basis. And we can use the capital fund to make improvements. After that, after the end of the lease, I would need to ask Mr. Hayes what he would feel would be best to ensure what you're requesting.
If the chamber did become the owner after the 15 years, then what we have in the current lease, and Darren already alluded to it, is the deed restriction requiring it to be used for public and civic purposes. And in my mind, that's more than adequate. And if it doesn't, then it reverts back to the city. I mean, that's as powerful as you can get in terms of ensuring that it's going to be used for civic and public purposes. And then Councilmember Dukes hit on there's a provision in the current lease for the next 15 years that it's the chamber's responsibility to maintain it in good order. And if not, then we have a default provision, which theoretically, if they're not complying with that provision, we have the right to re-enter and terminate the lease and become the occupant again. So we have that covered too. We didn't have the annual inspection. We could add that if you think it's necessary, but
I would like there to be an annual inspection just there to be a document that we can say, boom, we had the inspection, and it just be codify our responsibility and theirs too. That would be the best way to go about it. Yeah, I had the same questions regarding maintenance and stuff, because I've seen how outside maintenance goes down very quickly. How they would deal with that, since it's been now the employees of Yuba City that have taken pride in it. How much will they go after that, especially with the chickens and stuff that go on around there. The difficulty that we have already. And then the other thing I wanted to know, what perpetuated not to exceed $30,000, because I know the cost of repairs and things happening can exceed that very quickly, especially on an older home.
So we came up, so the number was 20, and as we were looking to transfer maintenance over to the chamber, we believe that it needed to be increased. We chose that number to 30,000 as we negotiated back and forth with the chamber. Also looked at historically what some of the cost of maintenance has been over the last few years.
Well, some of these things that can occur, as Mr. Toscano is leaving, he knows how expensive, how expensive it can be. So I was actually going to ask him to address it, so I thought you were leaving. If it's a valid concern that I have or not.
It is.
Okay. I've been in construction, so.
One second. One second. I'd like you to come up to the microphone and address.
Please.
Yes. Sorry, I could have been more direct.
As Mr. Hayes says, it talks about what the perpetuity on the sale is. It does not talk about condition. That's the problem that I have with the entire thing. And why sell it? It seems like it would serve everybody's function to remain an asset. I don't understand the functionality out of selling it at the end of 15 or 20 years, especially if the city's maintained it all this time. That's the city's revenue that they receive to put back into that house. It's not theirs, their revenue, the maintenance. That's the proving thing for me is that if I own rentals in town on Plymouth Street, and if I kept them in good condition and then I wanted to sell them, it would depend on whether the kind of person I sold it to. If I sell it to just anybody or give it to them for $1, then I think the asset doesn't have that much value. If I kept it in very good condition, I surely wouldn't sell it for $1 if I paid for it all those years. And that's just human nature, it's, and doing business. And I hate to see the city just go ahead, and I just don't see the purpose in selling it. But I do see the purpose in keeping it as an asset to the city and something for the people to drive. That's a main thoroughfare. All of us go by it, chickens or no chickens. It's important to the city. So that's what. I don't know if that answers all the questions.
Through the mayor.
Go ahead.
The agreement in paragraph 10 specifically says that the chamber shall maintain the property. What I'm asking that it be added in there is that there is an annual inspection to make sure that it is being maintained in the fashion that the city expects.
That's for 15 years, though. That's not after the fact.
That is correct, but that was part of the agreement that we talked about with the chamber because we wanted the chamber here as an asset in our community also.
Well, 15 years at $500 is a pretty good deal.
Understand. It is a good
Okay.
deal.
All right.
But also on paragraph 12, to clarify what Mr. Gale said, that the city would maintain the insurance. In the contract, it says that the chamber will maintain $1 million policy on the home. So they would be responsible for paying for the insurance on the home, not the city. I am very pleased with what the chamber has done since they have moved here to Yuba City and the leadership, what they have done over the past few years. It's an important asset to have the chamber as a part of our community. And this was part of the enticement to get them to come to Yuba City and to leave Marysville, quite frankly, was we wanted them over here. And that was part of the agreement that we had. We just now are getting to this purchase option that we talked about 3 years ago. I think that we've got the safeguards in this contract to protect the city and the asset, and even beyond, if they don't keep it as a public asset, we could take it back.
Well, it says it's a public asset. It does not say anything about the condition of that asset.
It does in this agreement
says
does
it in
say
the
that they
15
have to
years.
maintain it. I agree, it does. But we also have the ability, and if we need to put that in there, I'm sure that the chamber would probably agree to it, that even after the 15 years, that it needs to be maintained in a proper condition. I mean, that's your main concern, I
That's
presume.
my main concern.
So, I mean, that's something we could talk to the chamber about, and I don't see why they would fight that, quite honestly. But
Again, Mr. Toscano, thank you very much for your input. Elaine, did you have? Well, you were sitting there patiently, and
Mr. Dukes brought it up, that we brought the chamber to Yuba City. My understanding is the chamber has moved a good deal of their people to Marysville. This is a very recent thing. Are you certain the chamber's going to be here in Yuba City? I don't care if you rent it to them. I just don't want you to sell it to them. Because I don't think the chamber's going to be there forever. And you could have all the rules in the world, but what if it caught on fire and burned down? And then we lost it. I want the city to own it, and I want them to keep it. But that's me.
I do need to address one issue that was brought up, and the required insurance from the chamber is a liability policy to the tune of $1 million. It's not for loss of property and everything else. Any other questions of Mr. Gale? Comments from council? My only comments that I will make as a member of this council is, and I've said this for years, the citizens of Yuba City should not be in the rental business. They should not be in property ownership absent the properties that serve the people directly. To be able to take a community asset and turn it to a steward that can operate from that facility and do so over a period of time, I believe is good use and proper use of a historic property. I know that in the past, I will give you one example of stewardship. In 1980, I purchased two antique cars, a 1929 and a 1927 Willys Whippet. I placed those into storage with every intent of completely restoring both of those vehicles and operating them for pleasure. They stayed in storage for 35 years. I was not a good steward. And that's what happens with complacent ownership, or ownership by someone that doesn't have a direct interest in operating those vehicles on a daily basis. I turned around and sold those to an individual that could restore both of those vehicles. He did just that. That individual then turned around and gave one of the cars back to the original owner's grandson. That's stewardship. It's not about money. It's not about what that asset is. It's about keeping that asset for the future. Finding someone that cares enough to continue to operate that vehicle, that house, that asset for the community. Being able to be proud of its location, to have the public arrive there. That house was built alongside a country road and a dirt road. The country road was called Franklin Road. The dirt road was Highway 99. That house got moved one time in its life, and Mr. Toscano can probably tell you that. It was moved to the location it's currently at. The property owner, when the city became involved, the developer of that property wanted to move that house away from there. The city didn't allow that to happen. The city became a steward. They moved operations into that after the renovation, the very complete renovation of that home and the preservation of that home. I happen to know the last owners of it. They were good friends. And they were very proud of the fact that the city took that home. But they're also very proud of the fact that there is a daily operation that's within that home to this day. Now, that's their extended family. That's not the immediate family that left that home. But they're very proud of that. They're proud of the fact that the chamber's there. They're proud of the fact that people walk in and out of that place every day and are served and are serving this community. This is about stewardship. This is a historic piece. And cities are not historically supposed to be involved in these. We make the ordinances and the state makes ordinances that protect these properties once they become listed. And that's our job, is to make sure that this house stays standing for a long period of time. I would say that our contract needs to reflect the concerns of Mr. Toscano. It needs to be a little bit more in depth. It needs to have those pieces to it for the inspection, for the continuance of this, and certainly at what level of standard do we hold it to for the maintenance? It needs to be the highest level. The level in which they received it should be the level in which they turn it back over in the future if they were to walk away from it, or if the next public interest walks into that to operate out of. Those are how I see this. I've seen it this way since the house was first taken in by the city. The city's done a great job of being that steward and moving the process to the next hand. And I think that that's the direction that we ought to continue in.
What's your recommendation? Is it to go back and do a little bit of tweaking on this and then bring it forward again?
I think we could add the language as required tonight
Okay.
to this, and then direct staff along those lines.
To the mayor.
Go ahead.
I'd just like to add one comment to the fact that the chamber has moved a number of people over to Marysville. That is true, and the reason that is being done, and I think Jackie can verify this, but it is so that this facility can be used as a visitor center. Currently, it's being a dual purpose, the chamber and the visitor center. The chamber will continue to operate the visitor center, but that is the reason why they have the other facilities across the river now, so that they can run the chamber business there and still have this as a visitor center in our community.
So just to clarify, the chamber was able with a Golden Pacific Bank Corp to basically start up our region's first incubator. And the reason why a portion of their staff is over there partially during the week is to help begin an incubator. They look throughout the region. This was donated for 1 year to them for $1, and then they'll have to increase their rent payments to them. They are not leaving their presence, both chamber and tourism, in Yuba City, and they do not plan on doing so.
Thank you for that clarification. With that, I would like to recommend that we approve this item with the changes that we include annual inspections of the property to make sure that it is being maintained in the level that it currently is. And that perhaps we look at, and I don't know if we can negotiate with the chamber as far as after that 15 years, that it also be continued to maintained as a historic building in the community.
My addition to that would be that we, as a body, if this agreement goes through, that we appoint at least 3 people from the community, Mr. Toscano being one of those, one from the city, and then another individual to be those that help conduct those annual inspections. And I think that would assure that we are reaching to the level that is expected from our community.
I will amend my motion to include your comments.
Mr. Mayor,
Go ahead.
I just a point of clarification. I know that it takes 2 to tango, and the chamber's on the other side of this, and I just want to make sure. I guess my ask is that we're able to take the ideas that you've shared, take them. Mr. Gale would take them back to the Chamber of Commerce, and then we'd bring a document back that also would meet legal counsel's satisfaction.
All right.
That would be perfect.
That's fair.
Thank you.
And the last comment that I would have through the mayor is that 15 years from now, 30,000 will not be, or even 10 years will not be nearly as valuable as it is now. So if we can have at least an incremental increase after 5 years to the 40 or something like that to cover that, to make sure that it remains of equal value, that would be very important. So it's, discuss that with them to see if they like that, or
Some type of a
I'm going to
CPI.
protect them and us.
Some type of a CPI.
Yeah.
Would you like me to review the items that you discussed to clarify?
I believe it's going to come back in
Got it.
another document.
Perfect. We'll bring
Okay.
it back next council.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much. And thank you for the input from the community, certainly Mr. Toscano, as we move forward with this. And we want to keep everyone abreast of what transpires next. Certainly, looking at the next couple meetings, it should be coming back to us.